Tarrant County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
Hello, my name is LaVonne Nowlin. I'm a Master Gardener and have been a Master Gardener since 2002. I love to garden. I love anything, plants that grow in the soil, and they come up, and I'm always amazed how beautiful they really can be. At this time, I noticed in my yard last night that I've got lilies up about this tall. Yours are taller. Well, these just have, you see the red coming out, and I'm so excited to see them. And so I pay attention to make sure they have plenty of water, and I put a little compost on them and kind of dig around them a little bit and keep them aerated, because a plant's got to have air, it's got to have water, and it's got to have nutritious soil. It's something that everything all together, just like these leaves that I have right here. I used to teach composting at Veterans Park in Arlington, and I would go and get the leaves out of underneath the trees to show them. And some of the things that I would show them, how that plants, what they do with these leaves. If you look at a leaf, and on the edge of it, on the very edge of it, it's got a little ridge all the way around it, especially on magnolia trees. And microorganisms eat all this stuff, and this is just a perfect, it's a little bag of fertilizer. It's just not quite made yet. And so what we do is we break it apart so it doesn't take as much energy from the little microorganisms as it does. And then I break them up and dig them, put them all together and put them on my plants to just give them a little boost because they can use it. I'm going to talk today about sustainable living in a garden. And I'm going to be reading to you because this is not complicated. It's just involves a lot of things. And I think that you will enjoy this, I hope. We describe sustainability living as a journey that requires continuous learning, adaptation, and improvement of our basic business processes in response to the priorities of our diverse growth. Can I really give you a short version? Do we turn the water off when we brush our teeth? If our population grows by 2050 to 9 billion people on the earth, 60% will live in an urban center. That rise will increase global consumption to megatrends. I don't know exactly what the definition of a megatrend is, but I'm thinking that it's a lot of folks. But it will require more resources such as energy, materials, water, and food that are already strained. When we plant a garden, we rely on our mental resources to guide us use of the soil to get to the, biggest bang for our buck. Otherwise, we fail if our efforts aren't met with good amended soil, water conservation, healthy produce, and plants. Our first thing to do in a garden is to amend the soil with manure, compost, sandy loam, leaves, and straw. And we till this, and as we said, and we will water it so the soil is ready for planting. This is common for everything that we do. To save our water, we use an irrigation method and a drip system. A drip system is, my husband and I, when we were married, bought 5 acres in Aurora, Texas, which is close to Rome and Newark. And we had 3 acres that we put in a garden. And we decided that we were going to plant fruit trees and let people pick. And then we were going to try vegetables in between, and they could come and pick too. And it would help everybody. So we bought 99 peach trees, and we put them in on 3 acres, 9 pear trees, and 6 apricot trees. So we divided at the end where the tree was going to go, and it's got to be about 25 feet apart. It's usually how much you need, and by the time they blossom out and they, so we divided that by the length of the row, and we put a tubing there. And I don't know what it's called exactly, but I do know that we bought the emitters to go right next to the plant. You poke a hole in it, and you poke a hole in the next tree, and the next one, and the next one. And we can get a lot of, this gives us about a gallon of water per hour using emitters. That's the drip system, which is probably one of the best. Now, this saves us what would be more wasteful than a pop-up system, and that gives all that spray, and wind drifts, and we lose an essential amount of water that way, which gives us 1 to 4 gallons of water per minute, not per hour. We also can reduce irrigation if we plant the right type of plant. For example, a shade-loving plant in the shade. I know that bell peppers won a book off of the radio one day. Somebody said, what vegetable likes to grow in the shade? And I said, that's got to be a bell pepper. And it sure enough was, and I got a book. Well, so we have to do the same thing with our sustainable living too. Where we put our stuff makes a lot of difference. Then we have rain barrels to capture rainwater that is full of nitrogen. We can water by hand from the rain barrels and save some for indoor plants in the winter, such as herbs or ivy or corn plants or whatever you have. It's a wonderful thing. I do therapy once a week on a hip, and I took a peace lily to her, and it grew so much that I divided and I put another peace lily. So I took rainwater out of my rain barrel and took the water there and only watered it with rainwater, and it's just thriving. It's big and it's so beautiful. Another way to protect our garden is by mulching around the base of the plant with leaves, compost, and straw to build up the protection of the hot sun so our plants can conserve water. This is another thing. You can do this if you want to. Just put oodles and oodles of it. There's so much here, and this reduces so much. I have a friend, he was a master gardener, his name was Charlie Shiner, that he would go around in his neighborhood and get bags of leaves from people, and then he would compost them, and then he would have the most wonderful compost I ever saw, and reduce it. It just smelled like you could put a toothpick in it and it would grow, because it just had that much on it. So, but you can also do something like this. I have I don't know if you can see it, probably can't, but this is where my tomato was. And this is, I mixed up some leaves, I mixed up some some straw, and I put some compost in it. And I'm going to put this around my tomatoes when I get home, and I plant them in the soil. And it'll make them grow faster, and it makes me feel really good that I'm doing something for the economy and all that good stuff. Okay. Oh, wait. And finally, while we're conserving water, we can build a raised bed garden to rake the soil, pull the weeds, and take up too much water, and have an organic result of sustainable living in the garden. A lot of us, when we get older, we have maybe a sore back, or maybe we have a bad knee, or maybe we have a bad shoulder, and we can't do as much. But if you have a raised bed garden and it's about 2 feet off of the ground, you can just bend over and you pull weeds, and it doesn't hurt, and it feels good. And you know that you're doing something for the environment, and you pull up the weeds and do that once a day, and you just have a great time. And you dig around in it, and it's not so hard that you have to really dig down with your shovel and stuff. So you have a good time, and it's just an organic result of sustainable living in a garden. Well, needless to say, if you want more information about water conservation, you can call the Tarrant County Extension Office, and they have handouts there that the Master Gardeners would be glad to email to you. Their telephone number there is 817-884-1945, and ask to speak to one of the Master Gardeners on duty. They're there from 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday, ordinarily. I don't know what they're doing right now in the pandemic, but anyway. Sustainable living is a practice of reducing your demand for natural resources by making sure you replace what you use to the best of your ability. Be more conservative. I know that I have a waste basket in my kitchen, then I have a recycle bin, and I put paper. I even rinse out cottage cheese container and put it in there, and that wastes water. But I have a little pan in my sink that I use, and I dip stuff in there, and then at the end of the day I could dump that out, and it goes, it's okay. But I try to make more use of what I have, and anything that I'm going to recycle or anything that I'm going to reuse. So if you want to do that, it'd be a real good for your resources by making sure you replace what you do. And if I have a saying, it says, if it can't be reduced or reused or repaired or rebuilt or refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or recomposted, this should be a restricted design or removed from production. Sustainable living means a lifestyle that attempts to reduce an individual's or society's use of Earth's natural resources and personal resources. Example of other sustainable living would be stop using plastic, reduce your household energy, turn off your lights, find creative ways of using everything, cook food at home and eat at home, conserve water, support local and organic foods. Food wastage is also highly discouraged. And I'm going to stop there on number 7 and tell you something that I do. And I've done this for as long as I can remember. I bought a little garbage pail that has a filter in it, and you put all the garbage in there in the house, and then you take it out and you put it in your compost bin. At that time, I didn't have a compost bin, but I thought, what else could I do to get rid of this garbage? I don't want to put it down the disposal. And so I would go out in my garden, and we'll say the garden is this big, but it's big. And on the edges of the garden, I would bury my garbage, and I'd dig a hole and bury it. I promise you. And within 2 weeks' time, it was gone. Microorganisms and the bugs and stuff eat it, and it makes a better yield on your garden. I promise you, I think that. So indulge in activities and meaningful life activities to promote good health and well-being, such as walking, hiking, or biking. We have a better and more stable planet for future generations that way. And I will tell you one story before I close. One time I was on the telephones at the extension office, and this man called me and he said, I need to ask you a question. I said, okay. He said, I got a swamp oak. And I said, what? He said, I've got a swamp oak. I said, I never heard of a swamp oak. He said, well, ma'am, I was building a house, and the man had built my house, and he was also a landscape artist, and he wanted he said he had 2 big oak trees that he wanted to put in my yard. They're about 20 feet tall. And of course, they were in the burlap, you know, or in a barrel. And I said, okay. And he said, he planted them, and he said, they've been there for 2 years, and they have not made one single leaf. There's the same leaves are on them. I said, nothing's falling off? No. And I said, well, what did you say it was? And he said, it's a swamp oak. I said, I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out, and I'll do some research. So I did. And sure enough, there is a swamp oak, but it likes acid soil, which would be Arkansas, Louisiana. And so I called him back, and I said, Mr. So-and-so, I said, I've got 3 answers for you. I said, number 1, I said, if a swamp oak likes acid soil better than anything, and if you could dig around that tree about 2 to 3 feet out and go to Arkansas or going to Louisiana or someplace and get you a load of acid soil, dig all of that out, you can spread all that, it might grow. And he said, okay. He said, what's number 2? And I said, well, number 2, when I dug that hole out, I'd take me a chainsaw and I would break up those roots. I said, in the first place, did anybody look at the roots when they planted this tree? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, you have to assume a pot that's that old and it's in a big pot or in a root ball, it's got to be all gurgled up and all entwined in itself. And I said, so I'll tell you what I would do. I said, then I would take a chainsaw and I'd go all the way around that tree and I'd break up those roots. And he said, well, what's number 3? And I said, I'd get rid of those suckers and get me a tree that grows in Texas. So that's my contribution, folks, to a sustainable living. You have to do with what you can do. And I am so very glad that God has given us the right and the encouragement to tend to our plants and to our economic system in our